In addition to the general simcha that we have on Sukkos being Yom Tov, like every Yom Tov has simcha, and of course Zman Simchoseinu, there are also particular simchas that are associated with different things that we do on this Yom Tov. So first of all, we have the mitzvah of Daled Minim, where the pasuk says clearly, "Usmachtem l'fnei Hashem elekechem," you should rejoice in front of Hashem. We also have what's known as Simchas Beis HaShe'eva, the simcha associated with drawing the water for what was going to be poured the next morning on the Mizbeach. Out of these two mitzvahs, or these two simchas, the mitzvah of lulav, the simcha that's associated with the lulav, and the simcha that's associated with the drawing of the water, which one practically came first? So this is going to depend on a machloikas between Tanoim, because there's a machloikas on which day the pouring of the water started on Sukkos. And as a result of that, when the drawing of the water would have been the night before that. There is an opinion that the drawing of the water, the pouring of the water, only started on the second day, and therefore they drew the water on the second night of Sukkos. If that's the case, then the mitzvah of lulav, which would have been done on the first day of Sukkos, came before the simcha associated with Simchas Beis HaShe'eva. But according to the halacha, already on the first day of Sukkos, there was the pouring of the water, and therefore the drawing of the water on the previous night, along with Simcha. Now, says the Rebbe, since we know the concept of Elu ve'elu divrei elikim chayim, that when two opinions are brought in Torah, they are both valid, they are both the word of Hashem, so it's understood that both of these opinions have a room in Beruchnius. In other words, they exist on the spiritual level and in our avodas Hashem. Especially, says the Rebbe, that according to the halacha, even according to the halacha where the simchas the pouring of the water started on the first day of Sukkos, but the main simcha was definitely on the second night of Sukkos, because that's when they were already able to play the music and so on. Now, even though it was seemingly only a technical thing that you couldn't use the music on the first night because it's Yom Tov, but nevertheless, because we know that in Torah everything is precise, so it's understood that ba'amitis ha'inyanim, in other words, according to the truth of the idea of the simcha, of Simchas Beis HaShe'eva, it's really in some way more connected to the second night, or stronger in the second night than in the first night. And the question is why? How we understand this? So the Rebbe explains this by first explaining the difference between the pouring of the wine that happened regularly on the Mizbeach and the pouring of the water. Now we know that wine naturally is associated with simcha. And therefore, the simcha that's connected with the wine is still always going to be somewhat limited and defined by nature. Because wine itself is something that brings simcha. So even though when the Yid is having the wine, let's say on Yom Tov, he's sameach, he's happy because of the mitzvah, but the bottom line is it's still connected with something that's naturally something that's associated with simcha, and therefore the simcha is also somewhat of a limited simcha. Whereas water, which doesn't have a taste, doesn't have a flavor, naturally it's not in any way an enjoyable thing. So the simcha that's associated with the pouring of the water is completely and only because it's a mitzvah of Hashem, and therefore it's without any limitations whatsoever. Now that's as far as Nisuch HaMayim and Nisuch HaYayin in the time of the Beis HaMikdash. But we know that all of this also exists in the spiritual level, also in our personal avodas Hashem. So these two ideas represent two different types of simchas. The joy of wine represents the simcha that a Yid has when he's doing a mitzvah, but that's somewhat still connected with logic, with rationale. In other words, he's mizboin and he meditates, he thinks about the fact that Hashem gave me this mitzvah, what an amazing schos, what an amazing opportunity I could connect to Hashem, and that causes great simcha. But still, since it's somewhat connected to seichel, to logic, to contemplation, there's still somewhat of the person felt inside of it as well. In other words, there's still some room for his own self and his own nature. And therefore, it's still limited. But Nisuch HaMayim, pouring of the water, represents a simcha that's not coming from his boinus, that's not coming from contemplation and logic. Rather it is when a person is standing in a mode of Mesiras Nefesh, just completely dedicated, devoted to Hashem. That he doesn't need any logic, he doesn't need any explanation. The moment he feels this is a mitzvah of Hashem, he says in the Baruch Hashem, Hashem gave us a mitzvah, immediately this arouses him to a tremendous level of simcha. And this simcha has absolutely no limitations whatsoever. This will also explain why Chazal say Mishalei Ra, Simchas Beis HaSheva, someone that saw the Simchas Beis HaSheva, again, this Simcha that's associated with the water, the Simcha that's associated just purely because of a Yid's connection to Hashem beyond any logic. No, you haven't seen any other Simcha if you haven't seen the Simcha, because this is the one that's completely unlimited. The Rebbe says now we'll also understand the general connection between Simchas Beis HaSheva and Sukkah specifically. But first, just a little understanding of what Sukkot is all about. Chassidus explains that all of the inyanim that were accomplished, Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, come down in a more revealed way on Sukkot. On Yom Kippur, this is the day that a Yid's very, very essence is connecting to the very, very essence of Hashem. And that's really what Sukkah is all about. Sukkah is taking this idea of the etzem, connection that a Yid has with Hashem, the etzem haneshama, and now he's entering the sukkah. That means the sukkah is going to surround the person completely with everything that he has, representing the idea that the person is now completely encompassed with this level of kedusha that came about on Yom Kippur. And therefore this also expresses itself in the general simcha that we have on Sukkot, and more specifically the Simchas Beis HaSheva, which, as we explained before, is the simcha that comes from water, which is beyond logic and seichel. This just unlimited amount of simcha. Where does the lulav come into all of this? So Chassidus explains that it's not enough when our excitement, our enthusiasm, or the great giluyim, the great energies that we have remain only in a makiv way, only surrounding from above. But we always need to bring it down also more b'pnimius. It needs to penetrate us, permeate us also into our natural and regular faculties of our intellect, our emotions, etc. Because only then is when it could really last and remain and to endure. And furthermore, that itself shows on the lack of that limitation of that mode of Mesiras Nefesh, that it doesn't just stay in special moments and in special times, but rather it permeates the person completely in every aspect of his. And that's the idea of the lulav. By the lulav it says, Ulekachtem lochem. You have to take these four things that come with the lulav. Ulekachtem lochem, you have to take it to yourself. Bring it inside of yourself. Take all these great ruchnias, dika energies, but make it b'pnimius. And what do we do with the lulav? We take it first to our heart, representing again this idea that we need to take these great giluyim of Sukkos, but bring it to our heart, and from the heart spread to the rest of the body as well. Says the Rebbe, now we can understand why the main simcha of Simchas Beis HaSheva started on, according to one opinion, only started on the second night, and according to the halacha, the greatest joy was specifically the second night after we took already the Daled Minim. Because just like we said that the avodah that goes beyond limitations, that avodah of Mesiras Nefesh, an absolute bittul, needs to permeate us completely, the same thing is true with the simcha that comes as a result of this sort of avodah, which is that simcha, the simcha of the water. Since simcha is something that comes specifically from something that we have in a revealed way in front of us, and the real simcha is when it doesn't have any limitations. In other words, it doesn't just remain somewhere beyond us, but really permeates us completely. That's when you can have the real simcha. So that's why that true simcha comes after the lulav. After we took all these great energies of Sukkos, but we brought them into a pnimius, we're making it really impact us. We really relate it, we feel it. That's when we could also have this true unlimited simcha. Nevertheless, the halacha is, practically, they started pouring the water on the first day of Sukkos, which means that there was some form of joy already on the previous night as well, to a certain extent. Because bottom line is, since these giluyim, these energies of Sukkos, we have them ready, at least in a makiv way, at least in an encompassing, surrounding way already as soon as Sukkah starts. Therefore, there is some simcha there already. But again, the real simcha will start the following night after we took the lulav, after we brought the makiv into a pnimius. Says the Rebbe, now let's focus a little bit what happens nowadays in the Zman HaGolus, which minig Yisrael is, we start Simchas Beis HaSheva already on the first night. How does that all fit with what we just said? So the Rebbe explains, in the time of the Beis HaMikdash, this is when we say godliness was revealed in a very real way and shining, and therefore the avoid of Yidden then was in a much more, with their koiches pnimi, with their inner faculties, with their seichel, with their midas, they understood godliness, they felt it, etc. In the time of Golus, when we don't have all of this Gilui Elikus, the main avodah now actually is this avodah of Mesiras Nefesh, just going completely out of limitations, not so much with our koiches pnimiyim. This is the avodah that we say, Al Yevish Mipnei Amaligim, don't be embarrassed from those that laugh at us, stand be as bold as a leopard, and so on and so forth. In other words, the idea going beyond our logic and reason, and mainly feeling this Mesiras Nefesh mode. If that's the case, if that's our main avodah, then we don't feel as much the special advantage that comes the second night more than the first night, meaning the avodah once the makif came into a pnimi, because most of our avodah is really focused around this mesiras nefesh type of mode. But at the same time, says the Rebbe, there's a certain advantage in our Simchas Beis HaSheva nowadays than in the time of the Beis HaMikdash. Just like we say regarding Mesiras Nefesh generally, that it's specifically in the time of Golus, when we don't have the regular faculties as much revealed. It's the koyach of Mesiras Nefesh is much more revealed than in the time of the Beis HaMikdash. So too is true the Simcha that comes as a result of this Mesiras Nefesh, which is the Simcha of Nisuch HaMayim, going beyond Seichel, beyond logic and reason. In the time of Golus is even a greater Simcha coming directly from the Etzem HaNefesh.